It's Corona time.
Now, I know that some of us have doubts about what we're about to do. We'd be less than human if we didn't. But the fate of the nation, perhaps the world, is in our hands. We cannot, we dare not refuse this burden. I'm confident that each of you will do his duty. God forgive us.
There you are!
Answer that.
There's nothing quite like being able to sync up the theme song with the intro to the show. It fills me full of energy, Jason. It's appeared that it did the same for you.
It did for me for sure, but it started to get to a point where I was feeling a little bit like Dr. Evil in Austin Powers. My stool kept twisting as I was dancing, and I was getting a little away, like, you know, when he zooms in on this chair and he has to spin himself back around. So I was feeling the anxiety a little bit.
It was a good save. I missed it, but I'm going to make sure that I tune in later to watch the replay.
Yeah.
We'll see how we get through that. Welcome everyone. This is Happy Hour, and I am Curtis Taylor. I'm here with Jason Hendrick, your two regular co-hosts. Our third co-host, Joby, is a little under the weather today, so he
Try not to read into that too far just yet.
What's that?
We understand it might just be a little stomach food that he ate. So
right. I totally understand the reasoning. It seems like all I have been doing the last 3 weeks is eating and drinking as well. And so at some point, it's just the whole notion, it feels like a holiday break where all we're doing is just eating and drinking.
for me, it is feeling that way as well. Believe it or not, though, even with the amount of food that I've been consuming, it's probably the healthiest I've been eating in a while. I've actually been going to the grocery store and my quick little zoom in, grab my stuff, go to the self-checkout and get out of there. But I'm actually eating vegetables and things again instead of going out to eat and eating on the run all the time.
Right. It's good to get out and visit the farm stands. Well, Jason, I'd like you to do the introductions because we do have a third guest today. We'll be sitting in as the Joby Yobi sub for the evening.
Yeah, we're very excited to have Kyle Thiel from Ventura Coast Brewing Company on tonight. He's taking over Joby's spot tonight. And
Wait, I get to be Joby?
cool stuff about being a founder of a brewery. We're going to talk about can art and how that's infiltrated the beer scene these days, how Kyle's distribution model to the consumer has changed with all of our isolation and shelter in place. But initially, welcome, Kyle. We just want to learn a little bit about you and why you agreed to get onto this crazy show that we call Happy Hour.
Thanks, man. I do a pretty good Joby and
A Joby
for the next hour or so. Whatever you want. It's fine.
Well, it's it's a lot of color commentary. So as we go through this, we'll have to pick up.
Well, I think what's comical right now is a little bit of a connection issue, the little bit of breakage and cohesion that we've got going on. I feel like there's been times, Curtis, where we've had that with Joby live and in place.
It feels the way that it's supposed to feel.
And in fairness to our lovely co-host, Joby, he wouldn't be the only one. We've all taken turns in that seat where something just feels a little off with the show.
And I think in fairness to all of you, it's mine. And so, Kyle, one of the things I learned this week was after last week's show was there was some glitching out, and I went to just my profile picture, which Jason thought was a boy band-esque sort of.
Can you switch that for us real quick, Curtis? I think everyone this week should experience that. There it is. Oh, where's my
Beautiful.
pen? Need my pen and paper for autographs. Get the autographs while you can.
It drives the views, right?
Well, I tell you, as soon as you the profile pic last week, the viewership and the ratings of the show both skyrocketed. We went from 7 listeners all the way up to 12.
Right. Yeah. I don't know about that, but we'll
I'm gonna
see.
move closer to my neighbor's stolen internet.
So one of the things I learned this
You're
week.
6 feet away from your neighbor.
That's right. One of the things.
No, I'm stealing my internet from my neighbor, so I gotta move closer to them.
Well, Kyle's getting there. One of the things that I learned last week is that my internet provider was. I thought at one point I had really great internet service, And then I learned just a few days ago when I was making an appointment to get my bandwidth, my speeds all jacked up, was that I am running at about a fifth of the possible speed that I could be doing. And when I upgraded, then I found out that it was $35 cheaper a month. So I thought, well, wait a second.
Come on, you guys.
How long has this been going on that I've been sitting here waiting for, suffering through this? Anyway.
$40,000 Pinto when you could have had a $20,000 used BMW.
Right. So I think so I'm looking forward to future shows. So just know for you two and everyone else that if I go to my boy band headshot, that I'm doing it in an effort to control the bandwidth.
I don't want you to feel alone. So
while we're zooming and going to and streaming at the same time.
That's mine. That's old profile right there. Kyle got a good chuckle out of that one.
I think you should keep it like that. I like it.
Right.
But then they wouldn't get a shot of the beautiful Ventura Coast Brewery and hazy that we're drinking.
No, we got enough of a shot of that.
So, how did you get started with this?
Can art or the brewery?
The whole brewing in general.
Yeah, just getting into the beer scene.
Beer scene. I mean, I feel like it's a pretty easy scene to fall into. But I went to school up in Davis. They had general education classes where pretty sure for my major I could take brewing classes instead of English, which was a pretty easy choice for me. And I mean, it's pretty easy to get hooked on that from that. So they had a couple of like theory classes, and then there was like an industry class where every other week they'd bring in like Vinny from Russian River, or like Ken Grossman show all these pictures of like, here's this dairy tank that like I drilled 20,000 holes in myself like over a weekend. And so it was kind of cool to just be that close to like a lot of pioneers in kind of, especially like California craft brewing industry. So there was the local lager brewery, Sudwork, which was like a mud club member at and drank 4 times a week sort of thing. Ended up washing kegs there, I think for free for a while. It was definitely a couple weeks before they realized like, man, we've got kind of an old keg washer, and if it blows up and kills you, it'd be a lot better if you were on like our workers' comp policy. So, which like makes a lot of sense, I guess. I don't know. But so eventually was on payroll there, mostly on packaging stuff. There was a big old Crohn's bottling line that took up the space of an entire room. There was an old Norwegian guy named Niels that it was like impossible to run without. So that was a pretty cool. They've been around since 1989. But I think they're a really good example of kind of how people have had to adapt in the last 10 or 15 years. Of, you've got this really old lager brewery where 15, 20 years ago, people would show up and drink Heffen Pils all day. And then in the late 2000s, they really had to adapt. So there was, or the late early 2010s, there was dry hop lagers, and okay, how do we take these really traditional styles and adapt them into something that 21-year-old hopheads like really want to drink? And so it was like an interesting transition to watch like a 30-year-old brewery attempt to go through that, and I think they did a good job. And now it's full circle, and they're selling like a shit ton of Pilsner again. So like it's kind of funny to see that.
That's my go-to these days. I'm definitely on board with the lighter, traditional German styles Pilsners, and I mean some lagers. The Beachscape that you guys put out is one of my favorites. Dry hop Pilsners, I think, are a great bridge of light, crisp, easy drinking with a good aroma and a bridge to IPAs. I was drinking one last night, as a matter of fact, from Bergeron, and it's their wild kiwi, I think that's what it's called, but it's a Pilsner with Nelson and Saphir hops. I don't remember what hops are in the Beachscape, but there's something so refreshing about a dry hop Pilsner for me that can't be beat.
I think it's like a balance thing. So the Beachscape that we do, there's a lot of Kazbek hops in it, which actually originates from like a wild variety they actually found and then crossbred with something, but it's just like overwhelming lime characteristic. Yeah, I think it just does a really good job of balancing like these very crisp notes with these sort of like fruity light notes. And I think that's one of the things where it's like kind of cool to see this full circle of like, okay, so people, let's say early 80s, you know, you were drinking light lagers or something very refreshing, and then you move to this like Chicago style, almost like Sierra Nevada malty, kicking your teeth bitter IPA. And then, you know, into the mid to late 2000s, it suddenly became very floral and light session IPAs. And then it suddenly we're back at Pilsners again. So you kind of have this like full circle. So it's kind of interesting to see, like, I wonder what the next 5 years are going to be of that curve.
Well, I think, you know, one of the things with with Pilsners that that will always be on top for me too. I mean, other than I love double IPAs, but I'm with Jason that I really love Pilsners as well. But these session IPAs, they missed the malt on it. It was just hops and water. That is all that I could really pull out of those. Whereas a Pilsner, you have this sort of toasted cracker backbone that helps to support everything. And, you know, having something that's well-rounded is always a beautiful thing. And I applaud all of that round or end round is,
Yeah.
you know,
Whoa, okay.
where it comes back, where, you know, it's gone so far to the crazy whatever extremes of there only being IBUs and water, and then back to actually having IBUs with some sort of malt flavor to back it up.
When even in terms of crazy extremes, when we were doing the Pints and Pairing show a while back, you know, there was a trend of putting all kinds of flavorings, you know, any style for that matter. You know, stouts already had their direction of being aged in barrels, and then they're doing, you know, the lactose stouts where you had all kinds of, you know, sweetness, and they were putting in cherries or their chocolates or whatever. And then also we moved into the what were they called? The milkshake IPAs, where we were starting to get really hazy and creamy focused with fruit stuff. So I feel like, as Kyle, you were saying, we kind of brought ourselves back into, at least right now, a good balance and diversity in the beer styles, but also some cleaner offerings to the market.
So what happened to, you know, you guys are actually two perfect people to ask this, because like Institution just released a Smash IPA today in cans.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to Smash IPAs?
Smash, single malt and single hop IPA.
Yeah. What happened to those? Was it a whole balance thing? Because I feel like probably, you know, 2012, every single brewery you walked into, there'd be like one or two of those on the board. And that was like a big, like, we're going to showcase all these hops. And like the idea behind it made a lot of sense. And this is nothing, I'm sure the Institution one is like very good. It's just kind of interesting that like that was a very common, you'd walk in and you see Smashes everywhere. And I can't think of the last time that I've seen one from a local brewery until the one they packaged today.
Curtis, I'd be curious what your take is, but
Well, I just saw that there was a coincidence with that when there was the hop shortage and nobody could get a hop. And so then
That's a good point.
like, here you go, that we're going to have this for one or two batches. That's it. We don't know what's coming up. And then here's the next one. And so I hadn't put it until you just mentioned, Kyle, that I don't see that a lot anymore. Mm-hmm. That it's just these, although there are some breweries, Institution is one of them, where every week there's another iteration of a West Coast IPA coming out. And, you know,
or Topa's got their Solitude series, you know, like, yeah.
I think it still has some traction because people love a good IPA. But I think for me, if I were to wager some money on it, it's also in the sense that the general public doesn't have the nuance, nor do they want to go out and research all the individual hops and really find out what the difference is between each individual style. They want a good IPA.
Right.
And
okay.
I view it more like where the brewers are kind of the geeks in terms of their ingredients, right? So they get all psyched up about a single hop because of what profile they know it's going to bring out in the beer, and they want to make it the spotlight and the showcase. But the general consumer, I think, probably just wants a good IPA. They don't care that it's single malt and single hop, this like very technical approach to the IPA. They just want to know that it's good.
Right.
And so if you're offering too many single hops over time, I think it becomes almost like a muted sound point where they're not concerned what the new hop is. They just want to know that it tastes good and that it has certain tasting or flavor aroma characteristics.
Well, I'm trying to remember which breweries there was. I mean, came in 22s. I want to say that it had an M with it. I'm trying to remember the name but they ended up doing the same IPA recipe. So the malt recipe was the same the whole way. And then they were using, they would use different hops throughout. And it was just really great to be able to identify those, have 4 of those bottles and pour samplers and then taste each one.
That's pretty cool.
And being able to taste be able to taste all of the different hop flavors and put away that it was, that there was a nice malt backbone with these beers, but just being able to identify it. And I can't remember what the name of that brewery is now, but
I view that in a similar analogy of, the rich connoisseur who has 4 vintage Ferraris with a couple of interesting tweaks, right? 4 Ferraris in a series in his garage. And Joe Public comes up and is like, man, those Ferraris are excellent. What's the fastest one? Mm-hmm. They just want to get in the coolest car.
Right.
I think the like Topa Solitude series does a really good job with like a hop showcase thing of like an introductory thing. Like even if their main consumer comes up and it's like they're a chief guy, like they'll get a pint of Solitude, try whatever the hop it, like the Laurel one, and then you can roll back to Chief. And it's like, I think they just do a good job with that series in general of like, I hate Sriracha Ace. I mean, I think it's just like, I think most people do. I think it's a horrific, like the worst hop ever. It's just dill pickle and like, but the one they did with Sriracha was like really good. And it's like, oh, now this is like the first beer I've ever had where I kind of understand like what people are going for with this hop. And so I think something like that is kind of cool. And something that we've always talked about internally of it'd be fun to have like a feature series, of still like on the education side. It doesn't have to be a smash, it's like at the end of the day, it just has to be a good IPA. But I think, like Institution's West Coast series, or it'd be fun to kind of just do an education series like that.
Is there any opportunity to do an educational stout series where you did like a dry stout and a milk stout and or even like a robust porter ahead of that to like start building the ladder? Or is IPA really kind of the easy play in this regard?
I think from a production standpoint, that would be very hard just because it's like we could brew a rotating West Coast every month. And, it's kind of like what Topa was doing. I mean, we brew like 2 stouts a year because sure, there's still people lining up and, you see Casa's kind of the only people that I think can still get like lines for their stout releases. But, I mean, no one's drinking dark beer other than a handful of people lining up for pastry stouts or breakfast stouts or whatever they are. So it's like, we've released a couple. Here's our dry stout. Here's our Irish stout. Here's our American stout. And we get a couple people that like 2 people a day who drink dark beer sort of thing that I think probably get into it. But it's like, just from a production standpoint, that would be very difficult to try and brew a whole series and then have like 4 years of dark beer on hand. Just because no one drinks dark beer,
I moved to California in 2009, and when I moved here, because it was Southern California and I was moving from South Dakota, that there's a good 6 months of stout drinking weather. And so when I moved here, I was really worried that there wasn't going to be any stout drinking weather. I thought, when's the next time I'm going to get to drink a stout? And now here I am in my vest, my quilted vest and sweatshirt, because I'm so freaking cold
in a garage
that I could use a nice warming sort of stout. But yeah, wherever you go, you can tell the market demand for it, because it doesn't matter if you're going into even going into your local beer cave, wherever that happens to be, that there are no stouts, or there are so few stouts that the only stout that they ever get is whatever the habanero chocolate spice stout is from Stone. And that's not the kind of stout that I'm looking for.
I mean, Casa's still doing, I think they're putting out some pretty interesting stuff. And, they're getting lines for those. I know that people were selling 4 packs of Vagabond for like $100 online or something like that. So it's like, there is some demand out there, but I think that like they're always able to kind of like pull that in search of crowd. So I don't think it's like super representative of what we see or like what most people see in the county of just like, yeah, you get a couple people coming in and I personally, I think it'd be a lot more fun if we could rotate through a lot of series like that and be like, here's this warming one for a month or two, and then here's this weird St. Patrick's Day one or whatever. But it's just like, again, just back to Jason's whole thing. There's not a production ability to do that.
Well, and I think that personally, Curtis, you and I have debated this in the past, but stylistically, those type of beers you can only do one, right? You're only going to have one beer, and you might be full, you might be burnt out on it. I would like to see an emergence. There's a couple breweries that have tried it in our area, and I don't think it's caught on as well as it could have. And obviously, culturally, it's a challenge. But I like some good low ABV English ales as well. When I traveled out abroad and I went to England, I could have 3 or 4 full-size pints, not feel bloated. There are interesting flavors, and there was a spectrum there. They did a single IPA, they did a brown ale, they did a basic, kind of English pub ale, and they were like quaffable, simple, flavorful beers.
Dude, dark lagers.
Right. Yeah.
We did
it's nice that dark lagers are coming back through as well, because that there's this wonderful malt flavor, and you don't feel heavy or bloated after that. Kyle, I'm sorry I cut you off. What were you going to say?
No, exactly. That's what I was going to say. It's like we do a Schwartz beer for like, one of the 3 stouts we brew across the year. And it's my favorite one for sure. And it actually moves pretty well in distro because they can sell a couple pints of it, like the exact same thing. It doesn't fill people up. It kind of works well as a seasonal. And it's like, Enegren got their GABF for Nighthawk, and it's like I think it's a really cool style that I think it's just like a good answer to that of just like, okay, how can you go have a couple of those and make it interesting? And it's just like, yeah. I don't know. I think, yeah.
There's some nostalgia built into it as well, because I don't know about you guys, but growing up, I frequently burned my toast, and I just learned to like that because if it got a little too dark, I slathered it with enough butter that it was like rich, but also really that roasty. There was something really good to me about dark toast slathered with butter, and a Schwartz beer, a dark lager, a black lager, or even a black IPA for that matter, kind of takes me into that realm where it reminds me of a childhood dark toast.
It doesn't seem like a generation thing. It just seems like you're crappy at making toast thing. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
It is. It's a learning curve, and your parents would not. The best way.
My parents, Curtis.
No. The best way to teach you how to not burn your toast was to make you eat burnt toast.
Maybe so. They also put me sit at the table until I ate my vegetables, and that didn't always happen. But it also does seem like a good exit where I can bow out of this segment and refill my beer glass with another Arctic Haze.
I think that sounds like a good idea. So we'll take we've got about a 5-minute break here. We'll be back in 5 minutes. We'll be back with Kyle and Jason talking more beer. When we come back from the break, though, we're going to be talking about can art.
We are.
So yeah, that was the whole point of this.
So everyone is home, and we've certainly seen all the social media of all the craft projects that are happening. So we're going to talk about how maybe you can turn your craft projects into brewery gold, right?
Fingers crossed. If nothing else, it might equate to a 4-pack in your fridge for free.
Right. We could only hope. All right, so we're going to cut out here, and we'll be right back. Okay, welcome back to Happy Hour. We've got Kyle Thiel from VCBC. We've got Jason Hendrick from Jason Hendrick and Company, and Curtis Taylor from his garage right now. Right? We're all practicing social distancing to the best of our abilities, like everyone is.
Yes, sir.
I found it interesting though that Kyle didn't have Zoom on his laptop yet. Call him out. What?
I didn't take my girlfriend's
laptop.
the Zoom
thing. The Zoom.
We're trying to keep this brewery together, okay?
I don't know you well enough to Zoom anything to you, so let's just lay off for a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Things have been a little hectic at the brewery.
I can imagine. So, well, what we were leading into before we came off the break was we were going to talk about can art. And Kyle, I teach art and some design classes at CSUN. So art is one of those things that I hold. I'm always secretly judgmental about all of the art I ever see, but I never tell anyone that I'm judgmental.
You're good at hiding it as well.
Like every graphic designer ever. Yeah.
Right. But one of the things that has been, besides all of us being stuck at home, is there has been a whole proliferation of people posting whatever the crafts and arts and things that they're doing. And my point of view is I didn't come into art until late into my life. And so I love that anyone is using art as a way to either express themselves or to feel good about themselves, to find some kind of calm or peace. And so I'm never judgmental about why people do the things that they do, that's for sure. But all that said is we're surrounded by it now whenever you open up your social media. And maybe you're not so much, but because all of my social media is filled with art people, that it's pretty heavy that way.
No, I still get it. Yeah.
So, but one of the things that even before this started was local breweries, that end up, let's see, I'm getting a message that the audios aren't working quite right. Let me do this real quick. There we go. All right, so the good news is that this is on a backup recording, so the audio was on mine, it just wasn't being broadcasted out. All right, but so even before, years before we were all quarantined here, breweries did such a great job of producing can art or bottle art. And the first ones that came to my mind when we were talking about this was Stone. Those were the first ones that were just stood out. They were screen printed bottles, which they aren't anymore. Just these works of art on a bottle. What I want to know then the local breweries, they start to reach out to their local artists to design these cans. So
Unique and exciting about what I've seen and why I'm glad we have Kyle on tonight is that my experience has been prior to last probably 2 or 3 years, that artwork you're talking about, Curtis, though, was very, it was cohesive across all their different styles of beer, right? So you had a theme of Stone Brewing, as you mentioned, or Sierra Nevada. They had something that was recognizable from one beer to the next, even though there might be some small variations in the label, you still could tell that it was the same brewery. What I think I've seen recently, and I'm hoping that Kyle can shed some light on why and how it's come to play, is that each beer now is almost unto itself. The label of the can is so unique, it's hard almost sometimes to tell what brewery produced it or not.
Oh, you stole my talking point. But no, I think 100% it's hazy IPAs. Like to the whole point of basically, like, before that, the whole goal was building brand identity. It's like things were getting crowded, shelves were getting crowded. You had to build brand identity. So you had to have a consistent brand, like, hierarchy, basically. And it's like for our core cans, I got one right here. I mean, it's like we've got this belly band sort of thing. We've got a monostroke illustration on either side. When it lines up on a shelf, you've got this whole brand block that blocks out, and it's above. A lot of people with 12-ounce cans, I think, struggle with when you walk into shelves. There's always like a little price tag or something. So it's like a lot of thought went into, like, how do we brand block this? How do we make sure that when you're running by it on a shelf that it actually shows up? And I think, like, Made West does a very good job with that. Of, like, you've got this mark front and center, this huge white block, like it stands out on a shelf. With hazy IPAs, they're mostly taproom releases. You're trying to get them as fresh as possible. None of that sort of, like, really important, like, brand imagery, like, matters as much. And people kind of use it as this, like, trading currency or this, like, freshness thing. So it's like all the things that we, like, focused really hard on internally of, like, how do we block it well? How do we make sure that it's, like, consistent across all these different SKUs? Like, it doesn't really matter anymore. And it makes it kind of cool of like, you don't have to stay on brand, or you don't even have to stay on trend. Like you can do whatever you want, and just kind of use it as this like canvas to showcase this new beer. And so I think it's really like hazy IPAs driving that. Although now that I say that, I think it's like Institution makes some very cool labels that and they've never made a hazy sort of thing. But for us at least, it's just it was a good platform to kind of display all that. So like right now, I think the thing that was most sad about like our event that we had to cancel was like our pint size show that we do. And it's probably my favorite like community event we do. But basically we shut down like the whole middle of our tap room, and anyone can show up, and they show up with like 4 of their prints, and there's no restrictions at all. It's basically like, here's our die lines, show up with some sort of like label art.
When you say
And
that about the dimension of the label as it would be on the can, or are there other restrictions?
yeah, like if we were gonna do like a roll-on label like this, where it's like here's about the height of it, and then you can see there's like a little roll-on label. And so what we do is they show up with 4 prints, we apply them to 3 different cans and like a triptych across a box, and then they've got like a full display across the box at the bottom. So it's like, okay, here's the full label, here's how it would look like on a can triptych. And I mean, that actually came from one of the artists who like submits in our pint size show. And so
right now is the Arctic Haze. It's one of the first, this is your hazy that's now in the core lineup, correct?
yeah, it's now in a core lineup. We ship it to a bunch of like package stores and liquor stores, and it's probably our best mover in one of our best mover in cans. And so it's cool because like we probably, I don't know, 20 to like, yeah, I say like around like 20 submissions each time, and you get like all over the board, like Microsoft, like clip art. It's just like somebody clearly entered as a joke, and people have spent like a really long time on it. And it's like, it's honestly one of the hardest things, because like you really want everyone to win. Like I don't have kids, but like I assume that's like when people are like, oh no, I love all my kids equally, and like, no, for sure. But you clearly like one better. Like this is honestly like people put like so much work into it, and like you're like, I really wish we could put all of these on labels, because it's so cool to see someone who spent like so much time, put a lot of thought into it, put themselves out there, and put it on display in public.
Have you ever had Kyle, that you love so much that didn't win that particular pint size show, and you've actually stored it away for future use? Because as
I'm gonna say no, but no, but we have not. It is truly like democratic. Like we have not biased it at all. We've done like a handful of them, but no, it's been truly like, there's been ones that I think staff was really pulling for because they thought it would look really cool, or their friend did it, and it's totally public vote. Like you show up to the brewery, you get a ticket if you walk in the door, and just whoever wins. We've had ties, or somebody wins by 1, and the second place was definitely most popular by the staff. It was like, hey, like these people won, this is how they did it, we got to display it on a can. And I think it always works out well, because it's like there's no one, everybody enters some pretty amazing stuff, so it's like anything's going to translate well to a can. But rolling it back, it's like that's what I was the most sad that got canceled by all of us getting shut down, because that's our coolest public event, because it's like people put all this energy into it, and they get to display it, and sure, there's like 20 other on the table, but it's like your core group of friends shows up, and they get to vote on it. And it's like, for us, that was what was driving all of our rotating IPAs and hazy IPAs, actually, even our West Coast and our hazies. Because again, it's like, it's not like you have to stay locked into this brand identity. You just kind of get to use it as a really cool platform to show off. And I think for a lot of just, I don't want to say like amateur artists, but it's like, because we have professional graphic designers that have won the last couple of them. It's, you get it. I can't think of another medium where you just kind of enter in this like public contest, and then walk into like a a liquor store down the street and then like pull up your art like the next day sort of thing, you know, like that's pretty cool.
You have anybody that's purchased like a 4-pack just to store on their shelf in perpetuity because it was their artwork and they're like, I want to represent what I submitted?
Oh, we always send them with a bunch of cans, and it's funny because I'm pretty sure every time like their mom has shown up and like got a bunch of cans too. But we have these little like posters that we display in the tap room. We get a small size of them to give to them in a 4-pack. But yeah, I think there's just something very like tactile. You know, it's like especially if a lot of people have only really worked in like a digital sense, and we get all sorts of different mediums. So that one Jason that you have right now, that guy works completely in cut collages. So like we have the original of that. It's literally just a scan collage that he cuts out, and he's done a bunch of our releases. And some people do hand illustration or watercolor, and some people do totally like vector digital. But I think it's like a cool, very like tactile medium that you can like pick up a can and be like, oh, cool, I made this, you know.
Curtis, you have a Master of Fine Arts from California, Northridge, right? Cal State
Right.
Northridge.
Yep.
What's your favorite medium right now? What have you seen in terms of crossover from the world of art and brewing?
Wow, I don't know if there is one really, to be honest. I mean, just like the can that you have there that has this beautiful collage on it, and then going to something. A friend of mine who is a printmaker here at Cal State Channel Islands is the works is faculty here. She just had a can picked up by oh, it's in the Valley. I'm trying to think. It was they have a rye IPA. I can't remember, 818 Brewing maybe. Um, and hers is very graphic, digital kind of compilations. And you know, I think to Kyle's point that um, that you can't predict what's going to come through the door, what's going to look great on a can. And then in something that, you know, if it was an oil painting, you might think, how is an oil painting going to translate to a can? But then how is a collage, you know, going to translate to a can? And there you have it. And it just looks great on the can. I think that, so I don't know if there's any trends that I've seen other than, you know, if it is a compelling image, then that's all that matters.
Yeah.
Kyle, how have you seen some of those, as to use your phrase just now, Curtis, the compelling images? Is there anything that you've seen that resonates more with the general public? Is there anything that, you know, when you walk down the row of those 20 participants in the competition, you say, you know what, that really embodies who we are? Or is that even a prerequisite? Does it have to embody the brewery, or can it more fall in line with the theme of the beer or the feeling that beer potentially gives off?
Yeah, I think I like that. You know, the feeling that beer gives off of like, I mean, there will definitely be ones where it's like I personally walk down the road and one jumps out of just like, not even like, oh, it'd be cool to see that on shelf for us. It's just like, I want to buy a beer that has like that label on it. I think it's just like, you know, not really. It's like I think we have a lot of flexibility just because again that whole model has moved from 10 years ago. There wasn't that strong retail sales. It's like you were shipping most of your volume to distro, so you had to really be brand blocked and all that stuff. And it's like now that we kind of have almost like the luxury of flexibility, it's you can be all over the board with collages, you know, all the watercolors, whatever it is, oil paintings. So no, I don't think anything like jumps out. I think it's honestly, you see one sort of displayed out like that and you're like, that's freaking cool. Like that's at least what goes through my head when I walk by. I'm like, I'd buy a beer that has that on it.
You ever found yourself in competition with any of the local breweries for their can art? And it's a little bit of a loaded question because I think the other location that really has a bead on the locality of their brewery is Casa Agria. You mentioned it a few times, but one of their can art that jumps out at me is the Enigma, where they've got this very like graffitied railway car with Oxnard, emblazoned across the side of it, which is where they're from and based. Do you ever look at other breweries' can art and say, man, like we got to do one step beyond what they did, or we got to stand out differently than what they've provided?
Oh, 100%. Wait, is Enigma? They also did Oxnard Pale that looked a lot like that. What's up? Maybe it's Enigma. I don't
So
know.
as Jason was asking, there were just two questions before you answer whether or not you need to step it up. Is do you do the artists who participate in this, do they know what style of beer they're designing for?
The first time we were like, okay, it's going to be a Pilsner or whatever it is, a hazy IPA. And we're still kind of feeling it out again. I think we'd only done it 3 or 4 times or something like that. But it's originally it was like, okay, here's the name, here's the style or whatever, but then it's like, here's total flexibility. And then we'll just try and fit it in name style wise after. I mean, just again, what's realistic about production, most of them turn into IPAs, like we were talking about earlier. So most of them turn into hazy IPAs.
And then my other
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Curtis. Go ahead.
the other question was, when you were talking about that, you did this with your hands, Kyle.
Yeah.
So do you give the artists a template to look at before they come in, or are you just, when you see that, you're just thinking of it in terms of that can route?
No, when they sign up, they get like a fully auto email that's basically like, here's the actual die lines, here's the PDF, here's the AI, here's the like dimensions and real size, here's our print capabilities. And so it's like they have full information going in of like, if you win, here's what we need. We need like an AI file at this die line, this bleed and everything.
Right.
And if you win and we send it to package, it can't have anything profane on it because we got to get it by the TTB. So there's full information on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say 98% of them show up with the right dimensions, and then it's like anything like that where somebody shows up with like a whole 8.5 by 11, you got to figure out what to do with it. I'm trying to find this Casa can because I know they had Oxnard Pale that had that graffiti thing on it. I think you're right. Enigma had it too. I think
Sorry, I bumped in front of you, Jason.
I was just going to say, I think that's what's fun about it is that looking at different breweries. We talked about Institution, we talked about Casa Agria, and we have Kyle on from Ventura Coast Brewing. What we see, though, is at least in my observation, there's always kind of a defining element, though, that's consistent. And, when we look at the Arctic Haze can that we were talking about, you still have your logo on there. Like, it's very distinctive Ventura Coast. So when you look at the label art, you know who you're getting. It's not like it's so one-off or it's so unique that you lose track of what the brewery is providing to you. Casa Agria is the same way. They've got a very strong base logo that they incorporate into the graphic art somewhere, somehow. So I think that is also what brings great consistency, as long as the beer's good, for one. Like, let's focus on what's in the can. If the beer tastes like shit, no one gives a damn about the can art. As long as the beer's good, the label art is unique, I think people will resonate with it. And then again, you do have, at least from what I've seen, cohesive elements that make it into the artwork.
Right. And what you're just saying, Jason, and leads back to something Kyle said too, is that looking at going to wherever your beer cave is and seeing an incredible beer label, you're inclined to, at the very least, pick it up. If not, it's just packaging, and you want something on it that's going to draw the eyes and then say, hey, you need to really bring me home. This may be the only time that you're going to bring me home, but at least bring me home this time.
I think it's a good point. Sorry. No, I think it's a good point. You brought up Casa of like, they have such a strong like circle mark that then lets them do whatever they want behind that of, like Dana Stars, it's like, here, you've got the little hand logo and then you can do whatever you want behind that. And their label packaging comes from, I can't remember if he's in Colorado or he's in the mid, I don't know where he is, but the guy was originally, or still is, like a band, like an album artist sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you can see that like inspired in a lot of their stuff of like the sort of like chit artwork is very like detailed. And so I love a lot of their labels, and it's like you were saying, Jason, it's like it can be all over the place of like, here's this vagabond sort of like around the fire imagery, and here's it even though you can have totally different stuff, it still feels vaguely cohesive. And that was definitely like a fear for us of like, if we totally open this up to like a lot of our rotating styles is all over the place, how do you kind of make it cohesive? And you do stuff where it's like you strip out your logo and make it a little blocking out of it. So it's like, but I just think the consumer who's buying that beer like doesn't care that much. Like they aren't going to pick it up and be like, does it really feel like Casa to me, you know?
Well, the direction I hear you're going as well, though, Kyle, when we think about your core lineup, like we talked about, if you can raise up that can you had earlier, what's really cool about the core lineup of your particular label is integrated really tightly into the coloration are elements that are specific to that particular beer and also to the area. So if you could do me a favor, bring that can really close to your camera, show us some of the red area, and just talk about a few of the elements that are in that particular label. Because each one of the core beers, although there's different coloration, like the pale, I think is blue, and the base IPA, the resonant, is green. But there's little icons, there's little imagery in the coloration that also makes you stand out. Yet there's a cohesive lineup, like you said, with the banding and the structure.
Yeah. What a detail focused guy. He's so good at his job. No, no, like that's a good point though, of just like, so when we, let me see. When we were doing a lot of our like packaging design, because our cans came quite a bit later than our draft distribution. We'd go sit with like our distribution manager and our graphic designer and go literally just stand in like an aisle of Whole Foods and just watch people pick up beer for a long time. And you kind of watch where their eye goes, and you walk by really quickly and you see what blocks out. And I'm sure Curtis, you could kind of like attest to this, but like packaging design is like so different than a lot of other stuff of just like, especially on beer, we have such a narrow shelf space of like, you're working on an area that's this big on a 20-foot aisle, and you have to be able to block out really well. And I mean, I think there are people that did a really good job with that, of like Midwest, where you have a lot of white space and a mark. So it's almost impossible to miss.
Mm-hmm.
And so for us, we were doing, sort of on-demand 16-ounce generic crowlers before we got into actually shipping packaging in 4-packs. And we had done a very detailed monostroke black and white illustration on a silver metallic label. And it's something that we loved, you know, it felt very like rich and detailed, and like, oh, somebody put like a lot of design effort into this. And so we seamed up 4 of those, put it in a 4-pack, and we just walk into stores and put them on a shelf and like sneak into a Vons and like make a little space and put it on a shelf, or same thing with Whole Foods. And then hope that we didn't get like stopped when we took it out and tried to walk out with it.
Very
And yeah, super cover. Metallics totally faded on shelf. Like, it's funny, they did really well in the taproom. You hand it to somebody and it felt really valuable. And then on shelf, it was almost impossible to pick out. I mean, I feel like this very like graphic designing nerdy, but like it just didn't do that well. And it's weird because that was like kind of a notion that we went in thinking like, oh, okay, this is probably what we're gonna go out with is our generic stuff, and it just didn't do that well. So you kind of have to block out in this very like monochromatic way almost of people are literally walking by the aisle. And so if you can do some sort of brand blocking, like we do this middle belly band, and sure, you can add all this detail, but it's got to be tonal, because otherwise it just gets lost in the noise and you lose it, sort of thing. So I think it's kind of funny, like you don't think about how much stuff like goes in on shelf of like even the Midwest can, like I keep bringing that up, like it seems like a really simple can, but there's a reason the blocking is more than a third of the way up, because they got to get above the pricing, and they have the consistent like like brand coloring across the top. It's like, it's all these things that you don't really think that like somebody thought about that a lot, trying to get you to buy it on shelf sort of thing.
Well, I think, when what you're talking about, especially with the can you have and with the Midwest cans that you're talking about too, is that there is a lot of contrast. And the silver can on the shelf then reflects everything around it. And so it's reflecting the bottom side of the shelf. It's reflecting the pole, the standards on the shelf. So, and even though that it's this really beautiful reflective thing with black, right? You said black, like black detail writing on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that all of a sudden it's just that silver can gets broken up by that. It's almost like it's camouflage, and like
Yeah.
when
Oh, that's a perfect way. It's totally camouflaged. Yeah.
right. And then so like with your can, where is that big? That's what did you call it? Is a belly? What the
Like a belly band, or
belly band? So
you would know more than me. I don't know.
well, so those are this is the first time I'd heard belly band, and I like that but that breaks up that can. And then the same with the Midwest too. It's just high contrast, and then there's lettering that's in between it. So then it just you can't help it. Your eyes go to that area that's being blocked out.
So Curtis, you've lived in the Dakotas, you've traveled, you've been to a couple different regions. Have you seen, or do you feel like maybe you've crossed paths with any kind of variation or regional direction with can art as well, where maybe like, something in the mountain range is more consistent or more regularly used versus the Midwest versus us out here on the West Coast?
Boy, if they had, I don't see that a lot. I think that the one that I always search out when I go back home is Surly, and you can tell there's because it's it's this heavy metal sort of labeling, and you can pull that out anywhere. It's very graphic, and very busy cans. But any of the breweries that have any sort of marketing or design, they and if they have somebody who's worth their money, then they're producing cans that stand out on the shelf. So whether it's the belly bands, those kinds of things, it's just another you see those kinds of variations all over the place.
Sure. So since we have you on as our co-host and our alternate tonight, one piece of your imagery that I feel is personally underutilized, and I want to get your take on where it came from and why you're not leveraging it more, is the pelican. What?
I knew you were going to say that.
Logo. Because when I look at this particular can, again, we're talking about the Arctic Haze right now because that's what I'm drinking, and I picked up today a beautiful, rich, tropical, hazy IPA. But I don't see the pelican anywhere integrated in this, and again, that's partly because of the pint-sized show that you do, that where this label came from, local artists submitted. But what's significance to the pelican, and how come it's not leveraged more frequently in your work?
It's a good question. I wasn't ready for that. Okay. So just like a little history up behind our logo type. We at the time we were doing a lot of sort of like brand exploration, like closer to like 2014, 2015. I think what was very on trend at the time was a lot of sans serif typography. I mean, it's still kind of like that. And it was a direction that we knew that didn't really feel like us. Sure, it's very like on trend, but how's it going to look in 5 years? And the like industry that we're working, I mean, I feel like that's kind of the craft brewing industry as a whole. It's like, here's this kind of like historic, very like masculine industry. But you're trying to be very like on trend. And again, like I think people are doing like very pretty clean imagery and typography. But for us, it's like, okay, we know we don't want a sans serif thing. We want something with a lot of like history and character, but feels like very much like us. So our graphic designer, his name's Ben Blanchard, they basically came up with our own font that is a nightmare that we basically have to typeset every time we like do anything with. So I won't be able to get it, but on each one of these, there's little serifs that they came up with their own curves on like the radius of all of that. And it's nice, and there's little sort of subtle things of the trapezoid around the Brew Co is like an abstract view of the county coastline, and all these little sort of just like graphic design nerdy details. It's cool. Kind of feels like us. It's a little timeless. This very like rectangular shape does not translate well to a bottle cap or a coaster or something like that. And it's not just us. You look at Topa has their full logo, and they've got a reduced, more simplified mark that they can stamp onto your growler tag or your bottle cap or the inside of, you know, whatever it is, your coaster. So for us, it's like, this is already a pretty simplistic logo type. How do you actually translate it into a mark? So let's see if I can actually get a picture here. All of the curves of the serifs match all of the curves on this pelican. So there was already a lot of coastal imagery there, and it's like, how do you take something that's totally different in a much more compact form and translate it, you know, make them feel like they're part of the same brand family. And I think that's, you got to go find someone who knows what they're doing and pay them enough money to actually do it. But that's a good point. I think it's just like, I especially when on the pint size show stuff, it's like you only have a limited amount of space. How do you fit all of your brand elements into it? And so we typically just fit one. On our core cans, we try and get both in there. And a lot of our stuff, like our coasters, like this will be the only brand imagery on there. So it's a good question.
Pelican come from?
Sorry, what?
Does the pelican have a name? Where did he originally come from, or she?
Pelican name? Why don't I call it pellicle? But I mean, that's like a disgusting growth. So we didn't. I think internally it's still called pellicle.
I'm assuming that's something you don't want in your brewery at all. Anywhere near your brewery.
Exactly. Yeah. So that got banned internally. But no, it's like we knew from the beginning we were going to do a lot of coastal imagery, and it's like I think it's something that ties in well. And it's like a lot of it too, Jason, is we would go sit at Barrel House and look at 101 taps and be like, what stands out? You know, it's like it was a perfect sort of demo of like, you can have something that in your mind seems like it'd really stand out, not even just on shelf, but just on draft, like on the imagery there. And it just gets totally receded across the 5 handles around it. So it's really trying to find like a marker. And if you look at our tap handles, it's like, that's like the marker on top of like, people only have a limited amount of time at, you know, if they're crowded against a bar, they're standing there, or they're in a grocery store. It's like, you need that sort of wayfinder. And so for us, that's what it was.
Right.
You mentioned 2 extremes, you know, 5 handles, but also you mentioned Barrel House, which is a shout out to our normal co-host, Joby Obi, and his restaurant, Barrel House 101 in Ventura, where they have 101 draft handles plus 8 wine and cider or seltzer handles. Standing out, having been a former employee there, I can understand the fact that you want to be able to grab someone's attention from 6 feet, you know, behind the bar, where they can't get a good direct view. They maybe not have the most clear line of sight, but you want it to stand out. Curtis, I was going to ask you in terms of graphic design, you know, I like the fact I would have never thought to look close enough to think about the Pelican and the type font having similar curves or cohesion between the two, but you can talk a little bit more about some of the elements that go into graphic design and how you are able to create like a feel. Because I'd imagine any consumer, but also just someone generally looking at it as a piece of art, as a can with a beautiful label, how do you create a feel?
It comes from the things that Kyle was talking about, that when he was talking about the Pelican and how it's pulling these elements from the font over there, that's creating a unity in the between the two, you know. So it's bringing them together, even though we aren't necessarily looking at it or even consciously aware that those are connecting to each other. They're still a part of this, and those elements are repeated the whole way through. And so then that just brings this whole unity to the label. Now, like if you're going to put these on a tap handle and you're looking at them from 7-8 feet on the other side of the bar, you know, it's those kinds of things. And like what we were talking about, the cans, is having an identifiable having a contrast that brings the eye to it, and then putting a pelican right in the middle of it is going to be something. Or I really, I mean, I'm looking at the beer sign across behind my shoulder, you know, and then relating that almost to your trapezoidal shape, where it's what is it? Just brewing company in there? Is that what it says? I can't remember.
I think it says Brew Co.
Ventura Coast Brew Co. Like that, having that shape, that is, you know, you have this uniform text all the way across, and then you break the repetition, which brings your eyes right to that shape. You know, it's just making sure that you don't overwhelm the viewer with details. You keep everything related, and then you break it. And with your trapezoid in that, that's what happens, is it breaks that attention. You're
So
like, oh, wait, what's in there? Ah, Brew Co. Okay, then you.
what's in there? I feel like partially, largely at fault, because I was digging into some interesting details, but we've gotten away a little bit. We've gotten into kind of a geeky realm of beer in a can. Kyle, let's talk about good beer. And once we've gotten the eye drawn, once we've gotten the consumer hooked with the visual component of the beer, again, I'm drinking the Arctic Haze, a beautiful hazy, which you brought into your core lineup. How do you determine what beer makes it into a regular rotation? When it comes to good beer, is there a marker, to abuse that term that we've had tonight throughout the show, is there a marker where you say, you know what, I want this beer in my regular rotation or my core lineup?
Yeah. I mean, I will be totally honest here. I mean, okay, let me roll back around to that. But I say there are some production challenges too, of like, I think that, okay, before I get into that, it's like, I think that's the cool thing. Honestly, the cool thing about having a tap room, of like, it is your test kitchen for, it's not just this whole like, oh, we get to sell all these retail dollars and retail pints. It's like, you get to connect with like the people who care about your brand most, that are like the regulars that come in, the mud clubbers sort of thing, and really get an idea of like, oh man, like we thought that would land and it didn't, or this is something that we aren't drinking internally, but like it's just like we're plowing through kegs of it. And then you get to sort of step that off into like packaging or distro or something like that. There are some like production restrictions behind that though, of like, sure, we'd love to take this like $40 a pound hop that we can get like 1 month out of the year and brew like the best possible West Coast we can, and we all love it and we have like a great month, and there's no way we can have that on the shelf like 12 months out of the year. So I think that's just something that maybe people don't always like realize or connect with on the production brewing side. I mean, I did that as a home brewer a lot, where it's just like you have ultimate control over this like 5-gallon batch, and it's like super fresh. You can buy, you know, all the Galaxy hops you want or whatever, and you have total control. I mean, that's not really the same on like a 30 barrel scale of just like you're trying to problem solve to make the best beer you can given the environment, of just like, okay, we have to make the same beer year round, and we've got to be able to source these hops sort of thing and keep it fresh. And it's like, you're kind of solving all these problems behind the scenes that no one really sees. Like we talked about all the stuff with the graphic design of like the cans. And it rolls kind of back to that whole, like, what is good, what is core sort of thing, of just like, cool, like, yeah, let's make the best possible beer we can, but do it consistently year round and be able to ship a bunch of it. So it's like, it's kind of this balance. But really, like, we're still small enough that it's not like we have to sacrifice a lot of, like, we can still go out and get these kind of like boutique hops almost. And even what's big for us in distro is still like relatively small compared to a lot of people, because we're still fairly small. So I don't think there's a lot of sacrifices we have to make quality wise. And it's really just kind of leaning on that tap room for a test kitchen almost.
Well, we have about 5 minutes left for this particular segment. And Curtis, hopefully I'm not overstepping my bounds, but taking that as a segue,
You are.
and yeah, sometimes I do. Speaking about the brewery, you mentioned the phrase test kitchen and using the brewery as a way to really gauge what's going to be popular, what's a good batch, and what you can move forward with. We are in some unprecedented times. We can take the last 5 minutes and talk about how you're navigating the landscape right now, then, with the fact that most well, let me back up. All breweries, especially in California, are closed down in terms of tap room, lingering and as a gathering place. Now we're grab your cans and get the hell out of here. What's happening with what you're saying in terms of business day to day?
Yeah, it's hard, especially day to day of like how quickly things can change. I mean, we saw that this morning of like Santa Barbara County Health shut down people who didn't have a kitchen, but then it was like, oh wait, we're technically like food suppliers, and like I mean, there was a lot of uncertainty 3 weeks ago whether or not we'd be allowed to do stuff to go. So, I mean, we've got to be really adaptive, which it's kind of funny to think about. It's like we're probably going to be in this for the long haul, or at least from mid-March or whatever forward. It's like could be a couple month process, but you have to be really adaptive about like, okay, like we're allowed to do beer sales to go from the tap room, and maybe they stay steady, or maybe we got to ship cans or do door delivery or whatever it is. And it's like, so I think that's pretty stressful, just kind of having to be on your toes while feeling very lost. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty shitty, not gonna lie. Like, I mean, everybody's in the same boat of just like trying to do whatever they can. And I think we're lucky enough to be allowed to be open and still be able to serve people beer to go in kind of a safe environment, because I mean, we'd be dead in the water otherwise. But we're still allowed to do distribution, which is nice. But yeah, I don't know. I'm sure it's the same uncertainty and weirdness that everybody's feeling, just kind of in a very physical, location. So.
Well, I think that it was seeing, I think it was NPR this weekend that I listened, that I heard talking about the beverage and food industries. Now, Jason with the food industries and Kyle with you in the beverage, but they're talking about that of all of the industries, that these two in particular are faring better than the rest of them. And I can see beverage. I mean, it's, no matter where you look, people are just now realizing that maybe the only form of calories that they have stocked up in their pantries is booze, and so they're going for whatever nutritional value they can get out of that. But then also with the food, and with carry out beer or cocktails, whatever it happens to be, and then also with the number of restaurants that are doing carry out or that kind of, or curbside delivery. But like Jason, you can probably talk to this more, but like, that's still bare bones people working in all of these places. So like Kyle, I'm sure that you have a skeleton crew because you're trying to keep distance. Jason, what are you hearing from restaurants or
It's a really poignant observation too. I went over today just to confirm, full disclosure, we were trying to get on with a different guest tonight, trying to have someone distiller converting themselves over to sanitizer. And just like what all restaurants are doing, we pivoted very quickly. And I walked over, I bought a 4-pack of RTKs from Kyle and said, hey, come on the show tonight. That's the world we're living in, where people are pivoting on a dime. Like in a moment's notice, there may be a new restriction, there may be a new regulation that you have to adapt to. And the phrase that Kyle, I'm going to steal, is adaptive. You've got to be adaptive. And the food industry is the same way. A lot of restaurants are trying to turn themselves into little bodegas and grocery stores, and because they've got a loyal following, and the people that are going into those restaurants prior to the virus who are very loyal will say, you know what, I trust that owner. I trust the service. I trust the experience I was getting there. I'll buy my eggs and bread from them on the fly because I don't want to go anywhere else. I don't want to immerse myself into a grocery store with a bunch of strangers. And I can get that. Last week, Curtis, we talked about the fact that the bar would come back. I felt like the bar will be the environment to get back to, or the restaurant, that cheers feeling where you're comfortable and you want to get back with the integration of your friends and family and people around you that, make you feel at home. And that's part of what we're seeing with some of the restaurants converting themselves into a grocery store environment as well, where they're like, you know what, I felt comfortable there before this. I feel comfortable there now to secure my groceries and my goods. And then with the breweries as well, I know the people I trust, I know the beer that I like, and I'm going to go there to support them for now. And when things open up, maybe I'll get a little more adventurous, but for now I'm going to hunker in and really stick with what's comfortable and what's safe.
So my question to you two is what's the elasticity on that, of that idea of that cheers feeling of, oh, the bar is going to bounce back, of, okay, say the governor lifts sort of restrictions, you can do this whole thing. It's like, how quickly do you think people are going to sort of like rush back to that cheers feeling, like I need that familiarity and that return to normalcy, and we're going to pack along the bar, and sort of thing of like, what you guys have just got feeling on the
Yeah, great
elasticity there?
Kyle. I think we should revisit that in our last call segment where we talk a little bit about the friendships that are made and how we keep those going at the end of the day. So, Curtis, I don't know about you, but I think it's maybe time to refill if anybody's got a glass. And when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about that, Kyle, because I think it's an important point that we want to close out on. How do we keep that connection? How do we stay cohesive with each other in the times that we're feeling the most separated of any time I've ever been alive? And I'm 41 years old, for Christ's sake. I've never felt more separated from my close people, but yet there's opportunity to connect. So when we come back, we'll talk about that.
Sounds good. We'll see you. We'll be back in about 5 minutes for those of you who are watching live.
Happy hour again.
Were you wearing something else?
I just threw my sweater off.
Okay.
I'll reference.
Everybody's warming up.
Do you get more undressed during this segment? Getting nervous here.
You'll never find out.
And with that, we are back for last
Okay, good.
call. As Jason is derobing. Yes. I took off my Marty McFly vest. Jason took off his.
That's what we didn't. I was asking you earlier. I'm like, tell me again the name of the vest, and it was the Marty McFly vest. I could totally see Back to the Future. Kyle's just busting my stones right now about the fact that I took off my sweater. He goes, you get more disrobed as the segments go on, and none of you will ever
taken anything
how
off.
far the segment goes, because this is as far down as we're going tonight. But yeah, it's getting a little warm. Normally you would say we're warming up into the second segment. Right now we're getting into last call, where we're actually going to be winding down. But I tell you, with the Arctic haze, this beautiful hazy, it's like 7.8%, I think. I'm feeling a little warm. I'm enjoying myself.
Nice.
We've had a great conversation tonight with Kyle Thiel of Ventura Coast Brewing Company, founder, and also like home recipe. When you brought in some of those original brews to the brewery and to the Ventura area, I think it really showcased what exciting things were to come. And how many years you've been in business at this point, Kyle?
I have no idea. We opened October 2016. So hopefully we'll be able to celebrate our 4th anniversary.
I'm looking forward to that as well. Coming up on 4 years for Ventura Coast Brewing. Thanks for stepping in for Joby tonight. Again, Curtis, This is our last call, right?
It is last call. And so you've got your beer. I've got my my slow and low rock and rye, because it's the Lazy Man old fashioned.
It is the Lazy Man old fashioned.
That's the one that comes in the narrow cans, right?
Tiny little can. You can actually carry them on airplane flights because it's under the allotted minimum of liquid.
No shit. Really?
Yeah. So when I worked for Joby over at Barrel House, the lady came in, our supplier, pitched the slow and low. She brought a couple of cans with her. She talked about the fact that she carried 2 of those in her purse at all times when she flew. Asked for a cup of ice, and she could pour that in, and no one ever gave her a hassle in this TSA line.
Wow.
I like that.
But I tried one the other night, Curtis. It may have been too old, may have been too sweet. I'm not sure, but one sip, I had to go down the drain.
It's a nice mix, especially after coming from the beer.
That Kyle 3-ounce cans of Beachscape to go.
We do little 8-ounce cans of sours. They're adorable, but our mobile canners seeing a lot of that. If they're doing a lot of packaging for cocktail things like that, of either the sleek 12-ounce or the stubbies.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I don't know, people are really gravitating towards that.
Well, and
good idea.
Leveraging, stepping off, jumping off from whatever you want to say term-wise. When we think about your last question, going into this segment, you were asking about the bar, right? So how the bar is going to come back into play, how the restaurant environment, how that Cheers effect is going to be reinstilled after this whole isolation and virus issue is put to bed. So what are your thoughts, Kyle? You're our guest tonight. Tell us what you've seen with your tap room prior to isolation and what you're hoping for when we come out of isolation in terms of your tap room.
I mean, the thing is, I think I've been blown away by just the support of the beer to go of it's kind of been cool because not cool. obviously terrible situation, but it's like, because we've had to really run like a bare bones crew, it's like I've been in the tap room a lot more, and it's like you see those regulars like every day that like really care about keeping you in business or coming in and getting that like fresh 4-pack, and you get to see them up close of like, oh, these are the people that are going to keep us going for the next like month or two. So I think it's been like a little uplifting of like, oh, that the elasticity on that, it's like they're going to bounce back very quickly. About like, these are people who it's like they've kind of like built an environment here, they've really connected with staff and the beer, and the, it's like, they can't wait to come back, sort of thing. Again, I think it's not going to be this on off switch of life goes back to normal, of there's going to be trepidation or this sort of like slow roll out of groups, and it'll kind of be maybe a little awkward, but I think there's a pent up energy. I don't know what you guys are feeling, but seems like that.
You're down in Camarillo. You've got your little market nearby, but you also got your kegerator in the back, keeping you warm and comfy. You got your friend in the kegerator. But what do you think is going to happen? What are you feeling vibe wise?
Well, I don't think I see a repeal day sort of jubilation, where everyone is
I'm
going
gonna
to
steal that name for a beer. That's such a good idea.
boom, repeal day
Repeal.
jubilation, keep it, because the day's coming for us, definitely. But like, I mean, unless unless there's a vaccine that's rolled out, and we get to and we're all inoculated before the quarantine in place is done or the shelter in place is done, then I think people are just going to be still a little nervous about going out, even though
Yeah.
we've all been in place. But that said, I guess I'm just worried that I'm looking at trends in higher education, and summer classes are all online, obviously, and they'll wait until the absolute last second to change fall classes. But I'm not confident that fall classes aren't going to be virtual classrooms as well, because
Seriously.
because the trend of this thing is that that it's going to die down a little bit, but it's there are reports out of China that there's already a second sort of wave coming through, and putting 200 students into a lecture hall together, God, that seems it
And I
seems,
think that's
it seems
conservative. When I
risky.
went to school back in the late '90s and early 2000s at Purdue, one of my classes, don't judge me, don't make comments, but it was a wine appreciation class. It was in a lecture hall that was over 400 students. On Monday nights, we were there for 2 hours. The first half was theoretical book study, and then the second half was tasting. And actually, the professor would pull note cards out and call your name out. You had to stand up and note, 400, 450 students, and talk about what kind of food you would pair the wine to. But, 200 it sounds like a large number, but it's a small number to some of these campus classrooms. I can't imagine people feeling safe and comfortable getting into an environment where there's that many people interacting with each other. But to your point, Kyle, about the tap room, I think there will be a migration back pretty quickly, even if it's 30 people. There's going to be those individuals that are yearning for that communal space. And your particular location, not everyone, I encourage everyone listening to go check it out online, but it's a great communal space. Long table, you've got a little specialty room on the side, you got benches, and it's a great place to commune.
And I think I totally agree with you, Jason, that and for Kyle too, that your diehard people are going to be there. Those are going to be the ones that come in. But what I think will also help is, even now, I haven't been outside of, my wife and I run every day, but other than the run, I haven't been down the street in my block, in my neighborhood, for a week, and so, uh, s- and so when this is all over, what's going to be nice for me is then I can go down, because institution is like 2.5 or 3 miles away from me. Then I can go and get my 4-packs again on a regular basis, or I can feel comfortable driving into Ventura, parking and getting beer and getting back in my car. Not that I'm going to hang out probably until I feel, comfortable with that again, but that's going to drive business back towards all of the breweries and the restaurants too, that can, when the people feel safe enough to go out, that they're not going to catch something just by walking between the car and the front door.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question real quick, and then I'll give you the entire floor after that. Because I personally am looking forward to the day when your white Christmas lights go on again, the parking lot is totally lit, and there's a food truck outside. Because I live within a block's walk of your brewery. I could throw a rock from the roof of my apartment building and hit your brewery. I want those lights
Pretty
back.
sure you have before. Yeah.
Maybe only drunken rage when the Beachscape was out of stock. That's when I threw a rock. But I'm looking forward to the night when those lights are on and there's a food truck outside your door and I can walk down and get a beer and something to eat. Which food truck are you most looking forward to outside your doors? And what are you going to tell your guests on that night when you realize we've gotten past this bullshit and I'm ready for all my customers to show back up at my tap room? What are you going to say to everybody?
Oof. I don't know. Like, I don't know if I can answer the food truck thing. Like, definitely back to that whole kid thing. Like, I don't know if I can go on record choosing one of those. But I don't know. Like, that's a tough question. I think it's maybe useful to kind of like yearn for that return to normalcy of just like, hey, there's going to be light at an end of a tunnel and we can get back to this and see all the people we want to see and sell the beer we want to sell, sort of thing. For me personally, it's like, I think hard for me to mentally picture like, oh, like this is what, this is the day, this is where we're going to be back to it, because it's just like, there's that uncertainty right now of how long it's going to go on. So it's just kind of like, not to be a downer, but it's like, okay, we got to adapt and like survive in the current environment. And as soon as we get to that, I'll be over the moon and like make the most of it once we get there. But I don't know, probably just have a beer with all the people I want to see.
All right, that's fair. So indulge me then. Let's paint this rosy picture.
Yeah.
I'm no soothsayer. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. I'm not scientific. But let's say 3 weeks from today, 3 weeks from this moment, everything's lifted and people are like, all right, we're back. We're going to Ventura Coast Brewing Company. We're going to get a beer. We're going to toast Kyle for lasting out the bullshit. What beer are you raising and why?
Ooh.
What quick cheers are you going to throw out to all those public people that are supporting your brewery right now?
Oh, what I'm going to be drinking?
Yeah.
Probably light lager, so I can have 4 of them without falling off the table that I'm talking to everybody. But especially I think our light lager right now is very good. Did a little, like, we don't need to get too nerdy and be like next time we talk or whatever, but it's just like we did a little bit of yeast tweaks on it, and I think it's just like very, very crushable right now. But I think it's just, again, coming back to I think everybody's gonna have a long memory on this of like the sense of community and who helped them out when it was in a tough spot, and who was bringing you food or who was coming and buying beer. And it's just like, it's like the honestly, the people that show up for that, it's like, I'm never going to forget that, of just like who helped you through it. So it's like that would definitely be what I would want to touch on when we get through this.
I appreciate it. Chris, I got a question for you.
What's that?
Does this scenario, does the coronavirus, the COVID-19 situation, does this become our generation's, I used to walk up the hill in the snow both ways to school and kill a deer on the way for breakfast? Is this our scenario? Are we
Our generation. Whoa. There's multiple generations on this call.
For weeks at a time during the coronavirus.
When we are in our 80s and 90s, possibly. But to Kyle's point, we're going to have a long memory of this. Like, no matter if like 3 weeks is for me, it's out of the question, but I'm looking at more of the 3 to 9 month range. And like, we are going to be starved just for interactions outside of our families by that point. And I love my family, and I am so happy that I love them, that I get to spend the days with them. But just the hugs or the handshakes outside of, with our neighbors, with our friends, those will be the things that we are going to, that's what's going, those will bring us out. And then the fact that we're going to be sitting around and drinking beer all night long when that finally happens, like the cherry on top.
I hear you both. I hear that for sure, Curtis. This is for both of you. I
Thank
give you,
you, sir.
I want to hug you both.
That felt good.
Let's hug this out. We may have just started a trend. Let's TikTok that right now. And right, it's the virtual hugs. All right, Jason. I think that seems like the best place to end.
I agree. And Kyle Thiel from Ventura Coast Brewing Company, thank you so much for being our guest host tonight.
And
Joby, get well, sir. Get well. We shout out to you, Joby Yobi from Barrel House 101. Come back to the show, man.
Absolutely.
That little bad bit of beef, whatever's sticking in that gut. Come back to the show.
Beef only lasts so long in the freezer, and it can still go bad. But one of the things I've been meaning to say the whole night is the reason we have Kyle on is, one, because it's great beer. And the reason we only talked about the art, and the only reason he was here to talk about the art, was because it was great beer on top of it. I mean, we did very little beer talking, but when I'm in Trader Joe's in Camarillo, the green cans are the 4-packs that I walk out with, the IPA. So it's just, just to make sure that you go check that out. Kyle, shout out your website real quick.
Oh, I don't even know.
BCBC.com.
BCBC.beer.
A beer. All right.
Yeah. BCBC.beer.
Okay. So make sure that you go check that out, or do a Google search. And then when you look up Ventura Coast,
It'll pop up. Yeah.
Then
It's 2020.
Then you'll get there. Right. We can all hook into there. So thanks so much, everyone, for watching this evening, hanging out with us.
Curtis, you never shout yourself out, dude. You got to go back and watch old shows. Follow hopheadsaid.com. Curtis Taylor is the beer guru, one of the 3 or 4 like instrumental beer people in my life that helped me get into this industry, this appreciation for craft beer. Go to hopheadsaid.com. Check out everything he's got to offer. Shout yourself out more, Curtis.
Thank you.
Yeah, Curtis.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Kyle. Cheers to everyone this evening, or
Cheers.
whenever you're listening or watching to us. Have a drink on us, and we'll catch you at the next session.
Boom.